Today, I'm joined by Pat Murray. He's a high school math teacher turned global entrepreneur who transformed the way students learn math through innovative technology. Pat's journey is filled with powerful lessons, turning tutoring into scalable software, navigating business setbacks, landing a groundbreaking deal with McDonald's in Australia, and discovering that confidence, not just knowledge, is the real key to learning. On top of building a business that's impacted millions, Pat has also built a family of 10 kids and 10 grandkids, and he brings wisdom from both worlds. This is a conversation about resilience, creativity, and thinking differently about education and entrepreneurship. Let's dive in. Pat, thank you so much for joining us on the I See Rich People podcast.
I'm pretty excited to chat with you, Matt. Let's go.
And you're joining us, you have a bit of an accent, so tell us where you're coming from.
I'm from Sydney, Australia, so at the time of this call, I think it's 3 p.m. where you are, but it's 6 a.m. where I am in Sydney, a day ahead. That's one thing us Aussies are in front of you from you guys in the States, but I think that's about the only thing. So excuse my bleary-eyed for anyone watching this, but it's nice and early.
Thank you for joining us so early at 6 a.m. Yeah, it's 3 p.m. on a Friday here, so it's Saturday. You're in Australia, so that's great. You have an amazing story of entrepreneurship. Let's take it back to the early days and how you became an entrepreneur.
Yeah, okay, Matt. Early days, I started as a high school math teacher, and it was interesting because I always had a great love of math, and I really enjoyed my school life, and I admired my teachers. And I thought the teachers, they had a lot of time off, they had a lot of holidays, so that was attractive. I also was quite good at sports. We play lots of sports in Australia, but rugby was a sport that I was good at, and I was offered a professional contract as well. And that sort of suited the plan that I had for my career, at least. I was going, because you're never going to get rich being a high school math teacher, but I had a rugby career that was going to run parallel. And I was mentored, one of my great mentors was my school principal, who was a religious brother. He coached a lot of people in my situation over the years, and a lot of them had a teaching career running parallel with a rugby career. So you could, in those days, you could do both careers at the same time. You couldn't do that now, everything's full time. But the plan was by probably when I was about 30, I would have had 10 years of teaching, 10 years of rugby, which would finish. But in that stage, I would have had probably owned a couple of houses. So that was the plan. Now, the plans always change, of course. So when I got married very early, got married when I was 19, and at that stage, I decided to knock back what was a lucrative rugby contract because I thought it would be actually best as a family person probably not to pursue that. So that ruled out that part of the income making time. So what I did then, I did a lot of tutoring. So while I was teaching, I did a lot of tutoring. I did a lot of tutoring while I was at college as well, but that was my extra stream of income. And I bought an investment property when I was about 25 as well. So I did have that interest as well in property. But what I did find with the tutoring was that I would tutor these kids and I'd be showing them the same thing over and over again. They would respond very well. So I was quite gifted in the way I could teach. But I thought, maybe if I could, rather than teach one-on-one or small groups, maybe if I could reach a much bigger audience through technology. So I had always had an interest in computers. So I'm talking in the 1990s at this stage. So in 1996, 97, I developed some teaching material, computer-based stuff and videos and so on. And I tried it on my students, a bit like guinea pigs, which was great. Had a captive audience to try it on. And the response was pretty good. So in 98, I've been teaching for 10 years at that stage. Myself and another teaching buddy, we opened up a tutoring center. And at this stage, my younger brother, who's a computer whiz, we got his skills on board. So we had a great blend of skills there. And opened up a couple of tutoring centers. I left teaching, and the idea was that these tutoring centers, we would use our software exclusively in the centers, and we would franchise. We'd franchise the centers, and that's how we'll make our fortune. Okay. Things didn't go according to plan, no matter how good a product.
Pause you right.
Sorry,
I'm going to pause you right there for a second.
Yeah.
I want to back up a second. I've done drug calculations with our paramedic students, and one of the challenges I've found is trying to show them how to do math on Zoom or something like this. How did you teach them in the early days? Did you just have a camera set up and you had a whiteboard or a chalkboard?
No, that was the whiteboard and chalkboard. That's what everyone else was doing. I was able to work out a way, and this was actually before PowerPoint slides and all that sort of stuff. But I found an animation or a software product called Hyper Studio. So what you could do a Google search on Hyper Studio. It's probably a 3-month product. But anyway, what I was able to do was create essentially mini slides. And these slides, when I talk about a slide, talking about something appearing on the screen, and then the next slide is something, maybe another number or a little formula. But basically a lesson, a 3 or 4 minute lesson might have consisted of 200 to 300 slides. So it's like an animation. And then I was able to put my voice over on that. And then this particular program it was meticulously painstaking, where you had to put a time between each transition, right? So that was pretty crazy. And one of the issues was we opened up the 2 tutoring centers, but one was opened up. 3 months later, we opened up the next one. I got a new batch of computers, which was slightly faster. And when I ran the program, every single lesson was now out of sync because the processing was was a little bit different. So I had to go through every single lesson and change the transition. So anyway, so that was one thing, unexpected thing. Just wouldn't have even thought about it. But
yeah.
And then
I'm going to pause you. There's a table or something in front of you, and I keep hearing a thump on it.
Okay,
or maybe a towel. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. No. I'll put my hands under my legs.
Or if you want to put a towel or something down, that's fine. So are you still teaching high school at this point when you start getting this software going?
Okay, so at the start of the software, I took long service. I cashed out my long service leave, and that gave me about 3 months runway when we opened these tutoring centers. But the idea was, I wasn't going to return to teaching. But what I found, I didn't get enough students quick enough, so I had to do both the tutoring center and teaching as well. And that did that for the next couple of years, I guess. And when I say teaching, I did some casual or substitute teaching, so not full-time teaching. But then we made a decision that the tutoring hours, because they were all after hours, that was, a critical time, when kids get home from, my kids get home from school, and I had younger kids still at home there. And so I was absolutely zero support for my wife in that afternoon. So I made the decision, okay, I was going to stop tutoring. And one of the reasons too, is the parents and kids, they really liked the software, and they were asking us, could they buy the software and use it at home? So that was the shift as well. So we thought, okay, let's shift to the software side of things. And then, so at that stage, really, I was in full-time software development and full-time teaching. So running the 2 jobs at once. And my brother, he's working for one of the government treasury things back in Sydney as well, not too far from where I am. So he continued on. And my other buddy who kicked off with the tutoring centers, he went back to teaching. So that tutoring center, while that business didn't, I guess looking at it, it failed. We did get some validation because at one stage there we had what's called a current affair, which is a national news interest sort of show in Australia, right, nationwide. They did a piece on us because the results the kids were getting were pretty good, so they found out about us. And effectively they did a 5 or 6 minute national advertisement for us. That was pretty cool. And so at that stage, I think we might have had, before that, our sales might have been it was certainly in the tens of thousands of dollars, but straight after that, we had, 1.2 million in sales just on the back of that. So that certainly gave us some validation that the program, was accepted. Now, of that 1.2 million in sales, we didn't see much of it because being fairly naive in business at that stage, we had signed up to a distributor, and the distribution agreement was very much in his favor.
Oh my goodness.
So we saw some scraps. He did pretty well up to a point. But anyway, that was a business lesson learned because it took us about 5 or 6 years before we could unwind ourselves out of that contract. Okay, so it actually meant we were sort of handcuffed to that. We couldn't do anything in Australia on our own, even though I was keen on marketing it. We had to go to the UK and start a company over there. When I say we went there, we had a consultant that had sort of organised some people over there for us. But yeah, we had to go there to actually start marketing what we considered to be our own program.
How did you figure out how to be such a good teacher? Because you're taking math, which a lot of people struggle with. How did you figure out the winning formula to make it easy and effective?
I think, Matt, the best thing that actually I got wasn't from university. It was actually from tutoring. So I was tutoring these kids one-on-one, so I left school, I finished school when I was only 17 and a half. I actually started teaching when I was 20 and a half, which is a bit mind-boggling, but because some of my students were only a few years younger than me. But while I was tutoring, because you're tutoring one-on-one, kids right next to you, you're showing someone what you think's the best way, and you can see immediately, if you're sort of picking things up, whether they get it or not. And if they don't get it, you switch, you show something a bit different. Don't get it, show something a bit different. And I found that just showing different ways, it just allowed me to unlock what were the best ways to show kids. I mean, I always thought simplest is best, and also not to go very long in the instruction. So I always had that idea that, look, let me show you something quickly. Let's see if you get it, and you can try some questions. Okay, so that method, while it seems very simple, and it is very simple, it's not used very often, all right? In a classroom situation, you'll see a teacher 15 minutes, 16 minutes, 20 minutes into the lesson, they're still explaining something on the board, and I think, oh, gee, that's not the way to go. So I guess intuitively, I knew that shorter instructions were best, make it as simple as possible, and get them to practice what you just showed them as quick as possible. So that sort of combination, again, pretty simple, but it's just not done very often.
Simple doesn't always mean easy. And I know from training EMTs and paramedics personally what that feels like, but then trying to train other instructors to say, make it simple and watch for the result. Are they getting it or are they not getting it? Was there any other areas that you saw like you were very results oriented and it was working for you?
I know, math, of course, you get tested every year, every 6 months, and much more often than that even. So we always, with my students, they always had a result that they just had got before they got to me. I'd have a look at their test results and ask them, let me have a look at the test paper. So I did a bit of a diagnostic on what they had currently done. So that was good. I could spot what gaps needed to be fixed. And one of the big things is if you can fix some gaps quickly, they get some results quickly, then their confidence starts growing. So that was fairly critical. And I mean, it wasn't something I thought about at the time. It was only probably years later that I actually realized that whole process. And when I sort of did a little bit more study on psychology and motivation and stuff. But at that time, I wasn't thinking about it. I just thought, you got some results here. Let's get them fixed up. And then talking to parents after that, and subsequently over the last 30 years plus, hearing from parents, the biggest thing that I find is the confidence that the kids can get. And if they get it rapidly, it just makes all the difference. Okay, I mean, nothing worse than having someone who wants to improve themselves and try something, but they just haven't got the right system. I mean, I always love a story that I often tell about two kids that. One of the kids was 45%. He was feeling dumb. His parents had spent a fortune on tutoring. It was another kid, who's getting 92% in class. He's the go-to kid. People are going to see him. But here's the twist: they're the same kid, just 3 months apart. So that was probably one of the big things that that I loved telling that story, because this kid Wally Kassim, when he found us, he was really struggling, and his parents were at a loss. That they'd spent $4,500 on a program that was not working for him, and then within 3 months of using our system, bang, he was the go-to kid in class. So those stories are great. I love hearing that, seeing that sort of those results. So the confidence is a massive factor.
I think if you have confidence, it gives you that self-esteem, that dopamine boost, and it really does feel amazing. And if you can get those early wins in any area, it helps. What were the things that you were doing specifically? Were you doing like addition, subtraction, what kind of things? And then what were you doing that unlocked it?
I think depending on the age, because while I was high school math teacher, in terms of tutoring, I tutored primary kids and younger kids and so on. So really, I can't really pinpoint anything that was, a particular topic of math they did, but I would try to make it memorable. So I'd look at ways of making things memorable and easy for them to recall. I mean, nothing beats practice. I mean, one of the things that I see, through teaching now and a lot of the textbooks at the moment, they'll, it's like if they're teaching a kid basketball, right? You're teaching them to dribble. You teach them to dribble, but the way textbooks do it, most teachers do it at the moment, the programs are set up, a kid will only be allowed to learn how to dribble for 5 minutes, and then they're asked to go and beat 5 people on the court in front of them, defend. They don't have enough practice or time to practice the skills. So it's a criticism of the system, certainly the way it is and at the moment. But I just found, a great thing like trigonometry, for example. Now, trigonometry, and I know the reasons why it does trick people up, but it shouldn't, because there is a very easy way to remember sine, cos, and tan. And I don't know if you remember that, Matt, from your days at school, but...
Was it SOHCAHTOA?
I was going to say, I'm glad you... Okay, the classic thing there is that SOHCAHTOA is what pretty much everyone gets taught. However, if I said, how do you spell SOHCAHTOA? There's a problem. I mean, no one knows how to spell it. So I just use a simple mnemonic, which is some old hags can't always hide their old age. Now, that one there, you think that's politically incorrect, but I think hags was always witches, in the Roald Dahl, great classic witches. I always thought hags are witches. And then, but some people have said, Pat, you really can't say that. And I said, I'll tell you what, I say it, people remember it. And I have some great, I remember a great email I get from a grandmother who said, Pat, I just love that mnemonic. My granddaughter is, she's in year 10 now. She was in year 6. The last time she passed an exam was in year 6. She's used your program. And she's got a great mark in the 80s or 90s, and she just loved that mnemonic. So things like that, where you sort of look at things, how they've been taught. I mean, I had one great teacher when I was in my final year, and I did the highest level of math you could do at school. And he was a brilliant teacher. We didn't use the textbook. We just used his notes. He had these notes that he carefully wrote out. His examples were fantastic. He had a bunch of shortcuts and ways of remembering things. And I thought, anyway, I had these notes, and when I started tutoring, I used those, and I left them at one guy's place, one of my students' place, and I said, look, I'll pick them up off you after the exams. Anyway, I subsequently forgot about them, and then 6 months later, I went to get them back, and he chucked them out because he finished his studies. He threw them out with all his other stuff. I thought, oh, that's a shame. But then this teacher, Graham Arnold, I was talking about, he's then released a textbook a number of years later, and I thought, oh, fantastic, I'll have his thing. But what I noticed, and I was disappointed, the textbook was completely different from all his notes. It was just like every other textbook. And I asked him years after that, I said, well, Graham, why did you write a textbook like that when your notes were way, way better than that? And he said we had some pressure from the publishers that it had to sort of fit in with pretty much what everyone else was doing. So all of these great teaching moments that he could have passed on were lost because the publishers, didn't allow him, or he felt they didn't allow him. But so I always made a point that when we create stuff, I don't care. I don't care what any other people do. I just think I'll just create something that I think is going to work for the kids and it's going to work for the teachers. So that I think has been fairly successful differentiation from what other people are putting out.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And sometimes you have to go counter to what society says or the curriculum committee says. So it sounds like you've done that. So you established this business and you kind of are closing down the tutoring, you're ramping up the software things, you get publicity on Current Affair or whatever. Is that what it was called?
Yeah, it was Current Affair, yeah.
So it went like a rocket and the rest is history. You're just sitting on piles of cash, right?
I don't know where those piles of cash went. I always think it's a good way to, if anyone ever wants to get rich, but they're worried about becoming too materialistic, I do have a cure for that. And that is get married young, start having kids straight away, and don't stop till you have 10 kids, right? So if you have 10 kids, that cures you of any materialistic tendencies.
And you have 10 kids, right?
We do. We have five boys and 5 girls. So very mathematical. Kept that nice and neat. Not in that order, but that's how we got. And currently we have 10 grandchildren. And would you believe 5 boys, 5 girls. Quite extraordinary there. But with the piles of cash, yes, come and go. I guess this current affair, the instant success, I guess we had on TV, that was 2001. Like I said, we didn't see too much of it. Closed our centres in 2002. Back to teaching and software development probably for the next 5 years. So 2007. And I had a great principal, a great headmaster. He allowed me to sort of pick. Some years I was working full time. Other years I was only sort of working 2 days a week. So he gave me, because depending on how much time I would like to spend on the program. We were marketing it online by that stage. So in the very early days, it was on CD-ROM, then DVD, now online. So we were, 2005, so very early to be online, particularly with a video product. So my brother sort of created some pretty smart stuff that allowed it to be streamed over the old dial-up. I don't know if you remember the old dial-up modems, the ones you plugged in and that made those funny noises. Anyway, to get it streamed over, that was pretty cool. Then, so we were, really struggling, weren't making much, just making ends meet really. And then 2007, we were approached by McDonald's Australia, the big hamburger company. They approached us, they found us and found our program, and they said that typically when a 15, 16-year-old kid applies for a part-time job there, their first part-time job often, they would get this, part of the interview process, they would get this very basic literacy and numeracy test. And I can always remember the Vice President, Frank McManus, saying, "Now, Pat, this is a really basic test. It's super easy." But he said half of them are failing. And I thought, wow, that's an interesting statistic, because you just wouldn't hear any educational board admit to such a big failure rate. But so to hear it from McDonald's, unbiased, just saying this is what they're getting. So they used our program as a bit of a perk for their school kids to use at home to help with their maths at school. That was 2007, and that was, it was a good contract for us, but certainly wasn't going to make us wealthy. But again, a bit more validation, a bit more credibility. 2007, 2008, they called back. I hadn't heard a thing from them, and I just sort of got a call from out of the blue. And I thought, I hope this might be bad news. Anyway, it was the exact opposite. They said, "Pat, this program that you've got, the kids love it. The parents are ringing up, emailing us. They love it. Can we work out a deal to get this out to every Australian high school kid and teacher?" So we did a 3-year deal with McDonald's 2009, 10 and 11, where they paid us and to make it available, and they did all the marketing. They did all the TV commercials. I was on a national TV commercial. That was pretty cool, I thought. And have our maths online. We use the word maths in Australia.
Yes, I was going to ask about that. Why is that? Why do you call it maths and we call it math?
I've never researched why. I just know that always with maths. England are maths, India are maths. Maybe the question is, why do you call it math? We call it maths.
We do a lot of things backwards here. Yeah, I still think after learning leaders and the metric system for a paramedic, I actually would love to see us go use some of it. I think.
Oh yeah, the metric system seems a bit easier than US standard, but anyway. But that was a great thing. I mean, we had all this exposure that we just couldn't. They spent. They paid us millions, but they also spent millions promoting. So that was just fantastic. And then it was interesting when that finished, that sponsorship deal finished. So it was 3 years, and we had pretty much all our income from one customer, essentially. I mean, we were able to build a primary, because that was high school just at that stage. We built a primary elementary program and started to sell that. But certainly our major income did come from one source, which is always a big no-no, if you can avoid it. And when that finished, we a bit nervous in terms of what to do now. We actually did seek a replacement sponsor, and we had a deal, what we thought stitched up with one of the banks, one of the big banks in Australia. They pulled out at literally the last moment. So our school calendar year is the calendar year. So it finishes in December, starts again in January. So they pulled out in December. So we had to go then to all our customers who had been using this program for free, because we thought it would continue just with a different sponsor. Yeah. And we had to let them know, now that you've got to pay. That was a real unknown. We gave them no notice, except 3 weeks notice before the school year that this was going to happen. I had to go and apologize profusely about, and explain why it happened. And I was always very good at talking with teachers and writing. So that was good. Strangely enough, at this same critical time, we were getting sued by an employee for wrongful dismissal, and he was taking us because he'd also invested in the company, and we sort of ended up paying him out. But it was messy. So thankfully, we won that court case, but it still cost us $250,000. So thankfully we won. I don't know what it would cost us if we had have lost. And anyway, so this was all happening at the start of 2012. I was probably a bit more confident though, because I did all the numbers. I thought, a lot of schools really love using us. Even though they might not have budgeted for this year, they will use us. And I think if we had a 7% conversion rate or 7% retained rate of people who were using it free, but now they're paying, we would be in front. And now, thankfully it was well in excess of that 7% retaining. But yeah, we had to accommodate them. I gave a lot of people like a special deal for that year because I gave them no notice. I recognized that other schools could pay what we were asking straight away. So that was pretty cool. And that was 2012, so we've been around for a long time. We just sort of steady growth in the Australian market. And then we kicked off in the US market, mainly the homeschool market. So because we chose that because they were the easiest ones that we would be able to target or reach. And they were easiest to make up their own minds. All right. So if a parent thought this program is going to be good for my kids, they can just buy it. Whereas at the school district level, there's a lot of layers that you've got to go through, and it's an Australian program. You've got to convince why would this Australian program work in these schools and so on. So we've got right now, we've got a bunch of charter schools who use our program, but we haven't gone into directly into schools at the district level. One thing, because we'll need boots on the ground for that to happen. But that, part of the next couple of years, we've got plans to do that. But that's the journey there. So highs and lows, getting ripped off, one of the distributors. I brought on a consultant at one stage too, who we learnt later because he tried to take equity in the company and then sort of drive the company backwards. So then he could pick up more equity anyway.
Oh my goodness.
Be on the lookout for that, for those sort of things.
I wanted to ask you, I read somewhere that you had gone from a 15-minute video to a 4-minute video. Is that right?
Yeah, the 15-minute video, I never kicked off with the 15-minute video because I always thought that was too long, but I used that comparison. So in 15 minutes, because that's fairly typical, what you'll see, most teachers think that's a good time to show, but that's 10 minutes too long. I've really curated the videos so they're 3, 4, 5 minutes the younger level. Sometimes there's 7 or 8 minutes when they're a bit older, but really you've got that time to show them. And people talk about attention span and that, and maybe it is getting a little bit shorter, but I've always found that if you've got something engaging, you might think, gee, how can math be engaging? But there's ways, the ways of showing it. I often try to use a little bit of humor. I know I like your sense of humor, Matt. You've got a very dry sense of humor. I like that. But you want to try to engage the kids, where they're at, and make it a little bit interesting, and throw a few things in there that are funny. But a 3, 4, 5 minute video, and then getting them to practice. That's, it sounds simple, but as you said before, okay, simplicity is the new sophistication, I think. So it's an interesting one. People don't do it, and unfortunately, a lot of teachers, they like to hear the sound of their voice and they like telling stories. They think they're the most entertaining people on earth. And they've got a captive audience. Anyway, so I was very self-aware of that, I had I wanted to use a short span of attention to get what needed to be taught and teach it that way. I always remember this great story of Picasso. Now, Picasso, he's very old when he died, but he was about 83 at the time, and he's sitting having a coffee with a friend of his at a cafe. And he'd often do this. He'd often just draw on a placemat or whatever. He's drawing on this placemat, and he's talking to his friend. He's drawing, and his friend's looking at it. And they finish their coffee, and his friends look at this drawing. He said, "Oh, that's fantastic. I'd like to have it. Can I buy it off you?" And Picasso says, "No." And he goes, "No, really. What would you charge me for it?" Picasso thinks, he goes, you can have this for $75,000. And his friend goes, what? $75,000? And it took you 20 minutes. And Picasso goes, no, this drawing took me 63 years and 20 minutes to produce. So I often think that, a great teaching lesson, I've got so much experience now, but it may be delivered in a very short time, but it's backed up by a lot of experience in knowing what to teach and quite often, importantly, what to leave out, So I see, I mentioned textbooks before, and at the moment we're creating a new series of textbooks. Not that it's interesting, we've never really been interested in textbooks. They don't really excite me. But what I did find is that our program, while it's used in schools, each student might pay, I think it's $24, $25 for the year to use it. Whereas a textbook, which has much less capabilities of what our program can do, they'll pay $70 or $80 for a textbook. So anyway, that's taken me a while to figure out, Matt, that I should also be in the textbook game. We're switching to that, and we'll come up with something that will actually, I've done the figures on it, and it really over the next 2 or 3 years could actually 10 times our business just through that shift. And that shift has been staring at me in the face for, 15 years. So,
well, $80 for a textbook, I don't know if it's just in Australia or what, but that would be about 10% of what most textbooks here seem to go for. Like our paramedics textbooks are typically, I think, about $800. Now, I mean, that's a certification, right?
Certification, yeah. And I'm talking about a high school textbook, yeah, but they are about that figure, and they are big. I mean, yeah, we've started using some AI stuff with our own, intelligence and so on, and the textbook production that we've started developing some chapters, and it's going to be quite rapid. So that's pretty exciting, but it is interesting, and really, I only really started taking that seriously. Ben Hardy, who Matt.
Yeah.
At the moment, his company, or he's releasing a book, or just about to release a book about scaling. He's already released one with Dan Sullivan, of course, 10 times is easier than 2 times. And I've read that, and I've taken some aspects of it. But I heard Ben talk recently, and something really struck me about, if you really want to go 10 times or scale as quickly, set yourself an impossible time frame, right? So rather than, we were thinking we'll go 10 times in 10 years. But since listening to Ben again, I think, how could we do it in 3? And by thinking about that, I thought, because Ben talks about you've got to raise the level of the floor. You've got to drop stuff off. You've got to identify stuff off and drop some stuff that you're doing right now. And we're doing that right now. I've identified, a market we are in is New Zealand as well. But New Zealand for us probably takes up more time. It's profitable, but it's not going to be a 10 times. It's not going to increase by 10 times. But other markets are. The US market will for us. We've got a project in India. Now, India is a massive continent. There's a lot of people in India. And it was interesting because I always thought, India, I'm not sure you know too much about India, they love this game of cricket. Now, we play cricket in Australia. We're good at cricket. We're often the world champions. And I always thought, to get into India, you need a cricketer. You need someone who's famous, and I'm thinking there's a few Australian cricketers. I didn't know I know of them, but I didn't know how to reach them, how to involve them. So I sort of just thought it would be a wonderful project, but it's not going to happen. As it turns out, my nephew became a very good cricketer, and he's the current Australian cricket captain. He's massive in India. He was voted the world's best cricketer just a couple of years ago, and so he has a massive following in India, and we've combined. Yeah, so he's going to be our ambassador. We formed a new company. He's an equity partner in that, so it gives him a lot of incentive to do great things there. But he's excited about it. It's taken us a long time actually to get the Indian curriculum right, so that's frustrating. It's probably we're 4 years on it, and we still haven't quite cracked it. But anyway, we're confident that we'll end up cracking it. But for the amount of people he can reach just with his Instagram and put a post out or a Twitter or something, it's stuff that we wouldn't even attempt to go into that market because it's just too expensive to get your name out. But anyway, so that was great.
I love Ben Hardy's book, Scaling. I forget what it's called. I got a copy of it recently, and I was just talking to one of my business partners about this very concept that if you want to go from here to here, let's say you wanted to make $100, just as simple as possible. There's probably a million ways to make $100 if you wanted to do that in the next year, let's say. But if I said, how could you make $100 in the next 10 minutes? It filters out a lot of those things, right? I can't grow corn and sell 12 ears of corn or something like that. I would have to filter out everything. And that's really what that scaling analogy does. So I think that's great. One of the things that I see is that your product, to me, seems under-marketed. I think that you're sitting on a gold mine. And I think that you could really go gangbusters with this thing and go bigger than you already are. And hope you see that. But yeah.
I'll explain my thinking with the 10 times, just because it's a great exercise. And you're right. To go, for us to go 10 times in 10 years, it's quite achievable, just doing not much different from what we are doing right now, but just expanding into more regions and so on. But to flip it and go 10 times in 3 years, just in terms of my mindset. So I thought, okay, what would that mean? And I just looked at, and this is where this textbook idea came in. I said, okay, we're getting $25 a kid if they're buying through school. I mean, when they buy through school, like we might have 1,000 students at once buy it. So they're not going to our website and buying. We've got a different product for that, which is much more expensive. But I said, okay, without too much trouble, we could turn our program, we could deliver a textbook. So that's straight away at $80, which probably for us, which would have a $70 margin because for that. So straight away, our $25 per kid has gone to $70 margin. So that's almost 3 times. Yeah. The other thing is that our reach, because not all schools use a program like ours, but pretty much every school uses textbooks. So straight away, our reach more than doubles. So we've already got a factor of 6 to 7 times. And then within those schools, because kids still get tutored after school, right? They still get that, and they'll purchase our program, but our program tops out at $300-400. It's just an online one. But we can create a premium service and which sells for $3,000. And there's plenty of kids pay that much each year.
Sure.
And they're spending $3,000 on a uni student teaching them, right? With no experience. So we can come up with something really good. And again, just looking at the textbook idea, people buying textbooks, we've got the market we can directly market our new premium service to, and at a run rate or a conversion rate of 1 kid in 20, which is fairly conservative from where we are, 1 in 20 will boost a $60 or $70 per student on average to a $210, $220 student on average. That's way bigger than 10 times at that stage. Anyway,
there's so many different ways we could go with this, and I want to be mindful of the time.
Yes.
I'm thinking about the idea that, at least in the United States, if a student does very well on their SATs or their ACTs, that changes what colleges they get into. And so a small investment in something like this seems to me like it would pay dividends in the long run. Have you ever considered licensing?
Look, the licensing idea, we've had people approach us with existing stuff in the licensing, but we haven't really found a partner that we're confident with. Okay, and I guess maybe I'm a little bit too cautious, but I'd love to partner with someone who could license with us, and I was confident that they could do the job. I mean, we've had plenty of approaches by programs companies asking us to sell their programs as well. The only one we've done a deal with, which because I considered it a really good program, is Gary Sanchez's Y Institute. So Gary approached, we had a look at that, and we worked together, we collaborated, and we just launched that just the last couple of weeks. So that was good. And that's 15 years down the track, that's the first one I've actually been confident that would deliver what our program delivers, right, at that quality. But
congratulations.
But no,
he was my second guest on my podcast.
Oh,
great guy. Great guy. Yeah.
He's a great guy, Gary. Fun guy. He's a good guy. But there's a lot of opportunities. You're right. Yeah, we are sitting, fortunately, on a bit of a gold mine. But it is a matter of leveraging that and being a bit street smart. And I think we've developed street smarts over the years. But in saying that, maybe we are a little bit too cautious on who we take on. But I guess if you get the agreements right, then
or franchising or something like that. I see some ways that you could definitely get this out further. What haven't I asked you that you want to share?
I think I do get asked about life, the balance between life, family and work, and I'm much better at it now than I was early days. And I guess, but it's an interesting one because you sort of think, if I didn't work as hard in the early days, would I have been as successful now? So I don't think there's any magic ratio or number, how much time spent at work or family. But I do love the idea, and I'm getting better at this now, is taking chunks of time away from the business. And it's not easy. Certainly when you're starting a business, that's not easy because, often you're doing everything. Okay. Particularly if you're a solopreneur, you are doing everything. But when you get, some other people involved and you can train them up the way that you are confident that they can be trained, and really make a point, be very intentional about taking time off, like really taking the time off. So you're really engaged with the family because they grow up very quickly. I mean, our oldest is 36, our youngest is 16. So there's almost a generation between the eldest and the youngest. But it is amazing how quickly time does go. It is a cliche, but it does. It goes very quickly. And the cool thing about it is that, as the kids get older, they actually as a parent, they like you a little bit more as well. I do find that when often people ask, gee, your kids must be really good at math. I said, they're not. Some of them are really good and others aren't. And I actually got in trouble for saying that once because one of my daughters, third daughter, she works full time in the company with us. And one of the things I got her to do, she had to transcribe a whole bunch of podcasts that I had been a guest on. And in one of those podcasts, I said, look, my top 2 kids were really smart at math. My next 2, not so good. And Sarah said, Dad, you're saying to everyone that I'm not that good at math. I was. And I think, oh, yeah, she was actually. So.
It's always the risk of connecting with somebody on a podcast and sometimes forgetting that this is going to go public. And you forget, and it feels more like just a conversation over dinner, and you have to be very careful. I've said one thing about my brother one time. I've said something probably about my wife, my daughter, and not intentional. It's just when you connect with people, and those stories are educational. But
they are educational. That's right. Yeah. And it also gives you a chance to make good because, Sarah, you are a great math teacher. You're a great math student, and you're a great CFO. So there you go, Sarah.
There you go. Right back at her. Yeah.
Right back at her.
Pat, if people want to find out about your product or your program or connect with you and maybe help you leverage this thing into something even bigger and mine some of this gold, how can they find you?
Okay, easiest way is the website mathonline.com.
Nope.
So so mathonline.com. And you can find me there. You can send anything to me. It'll reach someone on the team. They'll pass it on. They're very good at passing on stuff. You just say, if you want to get me direct, just say, hey, Pat, in the subject. It'll get to me. So that's the best spot for us. And we've also got the Maths Online at various places around.
I was going to ask, but I didn't want to give that away in case you didn't have it. I was going to do it off camera and say, if you don't own Maths Online, do they both direct to the same website, or do you just own Maths?
Yeah, it's interesting. The Maths Online, because there's a .com.au, that's the Australian one. And then we've got mathsonline.co, and we're in the process of redirecting everything to that one, so in just different region. But for the US, it is mathonline.com, which we had to pay a fair bit of money to get because someone had already got it. And our other program for homeschoolers particularly is ctcmath.com. CTC, so that's cut through curriculum or cut the crap or whatever. It's straight to the point anyway. So that's how you can find me.
All right. Pat, this has been great. I really enjoyed learning about your math experience. It's very interesting to talk to somebody with math, a background like yours, and see things differently. So thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Matt. It's been great talking with you. And I hope this resonates with some people. My final message, I guess, as an entrepreneur, it can feel lonely. It can feel that you're doubted by not only other people, but yourself at times. But I'd encourage you to keep going. It's a great thing. Entrepreneurs, we need more of them.
That's a fact. It's been the greatest journey, the highs, the lows. I love the illustration of what entrepreneurship is like. hell yes. Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no. Oh, heck yes, right? And it's a little more strongly worded than that, but I still
I've
think
seen
it's
some
amazing.
language a little bit stronger than that, but
Yes.
it certainly resonates.
We try to keep it a G-rated thing so we don't have to put that explicit warning on there, but it is what it is. So anyway, thank you again, Pat. I really appreciate it. Until
My
next
pleasure,
time.
Matt. Well, Nick, bye-bye.
Bye.